Hi everyone, welcome to lesson 1.5, Energy Flow and Ecosystems. Remember to fill out your guided notes as we go along. So first, go ahead, pause here. You're going to watch a quick video. The link to the video will be back in Blend. Okay, now that you've watched the video, you should have these questions answered in your notes. So we're going to be talking about energy flow first. So we know sunlight is the main energy source for life on Earth. Energy flows through an ecosystem in one direction. So remember, energy can be stored in living systems, but it cannot be reused. So that's why we say energy flows in a one-way stream. However, matter can be reused or recycled as nutrients within and between ecosystems. So energy is not recycled, but matter is recycled. And we're going to talk a lot more about matter cycles in the next lesson. So think to yourself, what is the diagram to the left? This diagram right here, what is it called? What is the primary producer in this diagram? And what is the first level or primary consumer in this diagram? So this diagram to the left is called a food chain. You have probably seen one before. The primary producer for this specific one is algae, and the first level or primary consumer would be the flagfish, because the flagfish is the first thing that consumes the algae. Now, for feeding relationships, food chains are a series of steps in which organisms transfer energy by eating and being eaten. It shows the one-way flow of energy in an ecosystem. So on this last slide, remember, we just saw this food chain. Okay, now food webs, here to the right, this is a food web. And food webs are complex networks of feeding interactions. So here we are thinking, what is the diagram to the right called? We just answered that, that's a food web. What is a primary producer in this diagram, and what is a decomposer in this diagram? So you can pause here, kind of try to find the primary producer and decomposer. So the two primary producers shown, you have algae here, and you also have plants, leaves, seeds, fruits. And then the decomposer is here, bacteria and associated fungi. And if you look right here, this is a key kind of showing all of the arrows as well as the different levels of consumers. Next, you're going to pause and you're going to go back to Blend and watch this video, The Secret Life of Plankton. It is linked in Blend. So pause here, watch, and then come back once you've finished. Okay, so now you should have these questions answered in your notes. So our first check for understanding, we're looking at a food web. So 1, what is the primary producer? 2, what are some different sources of food for the leopard seal? And 3, what would happen if the population of krill drops substantially? So examine this food web, pause here, and try to answer these yourself. Now we're going to go through this check for understanding. So what is the primary producer in the food web? Well, right here, it is labeled for us, but it is algae. That would be our primary producer. What are some different sources of food for the leopard seal? So you're going to go up into this diagram, find the leopard seal, and any arrows moving towards the leopard seal is kind of showing where the energy is going. So here you're looking at all of the arrows pointing to the leopard seal. So here are the different sources of food based on this diagram. And then last, what would happen if the population of krill drops substantially? So krill is right here. Okay, it's one step after the primary producer, but you need to look and see how many arrows are coming off of krill, or how many things rely on consuming krill. So if krill drops substantially, this would not only affect your first level consumers or after, this would affect all the way up to the killer whale, right? Because every single step within that food web depends on one step below it, and so on and so forth. So that would also cause top level consumers to have a food shortage as well. So energy flow through trophic levels. Each ecological pyramids are models that show the relative amount of energy or matter contained within each trophic level in a given food chain or web. And there are 3 different types of ecological pyramids that we're going to discuss: pyramid of energy, biomass, and numbers. Trophic levels are each step in a food chain or web. And in general, only about 10% of energy available in one trophic level is passed to the next level. This is known as the 10% rule. Our first trophic level here is the primary producer. And then after that, they are consumers. So we have first level, second level, third level. And then you can see in this diagram this 10% rule, and then anything that is not used is given off as heat. Okay, so this right here is an example of a pyramid of energy, and that is showing the relative amount of energy available at each trophic level of a food chain or web. So the most energy is always going to be at the bottom or at the primary producer level. So here's our first check for understanding. Go ahead, pause here, try these out on your own, and then we'll go over them. Okay, so first check for understanding. If a plant produces 200 calories worth of food, how many would be available to the mouse that eats the plant? So remember, the plant's going to be the primary producer, mouse is going to be the first level consumer, and the mouse would get 10% of the energy from the plant, or 20 calories, okay, because 10% of 200 is 20. An owl then eats the mouse. How many calories would be available for the mouse, okay? For the owl. So the mouse would be the first level consumer, the owl would be the second level consumer. The owl would get 10% of the energy available from the mouse, or 2 calories, right? Because 10% of 20 is 2. Okay, number 3, how does the example above relate to how many organisms are found at the top levels of a food pyramid versus the lower levels? So typically there are fewer organisms at the top level of the pyramid than at lower levels. So a very broad example would be there's always more insects than birds. And then last, energy is said to flow in a one-way stream through an ecosystem. In your own words, describe what this means. So again, many correct answers here. Answers are going to vary, but energy flows one way, matter is recycled. So biomass is the total amount of living tissue within a given trophic level, okay? And then here are other 2 pyramids. So a pyramid of biomass is a model that illustrates the relative amount of living organic matter at each trophic level in an ecosystem. A pyramid of numbers is the model that shows the relative number of individual organisms. So kind of think to yourself, what were the 3 types of each ecological pyramids, and what does a pyramid of energy show? So if you remember, pyramid of numbers, pyramid of biomass, we also have a pyramid of energy, and pyramids of energy show the relative amount of energy at each trophic level. Now, looking at pyramids, okay, so this slide can tend to be a little bit confusing, but we're going to talk through, okay? So part A, these 2 examples, so this whole block are both examples of pyramids of biomass. Part B, right here, these 2 are both examples of pyramids of numbers. And part C, this is a pyramid of energy, okay? And here are the colors to code for each of those examples. So that's going to remain constant, okay? So part A shows 2 pyramids of biomass. So we're going to think, why would plants, the primary producer, be the largest piece of the pyramid for this example, right? Well, plants have a relatively large biomass, okay? Whereas insects or snails have lower biomass. Fish and fish here are also relatively low. So in this one, plants make up the largest amount of living tissue in that specific pyramid. Okay, now looking at this next one, why would phytoplankton, the primary producer, have the smallest piece of the pyramid? Well, for this specific example, looking at some square meter in the English Channel, it just so happens that phytoplankton are much smaller than zooplankton. So phytoplankton is going to have the smallest piece of this pyramid of biomass. Just because they are smaller, therefore they have less mass, but they are still the primary producer, even though they have the smaller part of this pyramid. Next part, why would grass plants, looking at our two pyramid of numbers, why would grass plants, the primary producer, be the largest piece of the pyramid? So now we are just looking at the actual number of things. Okay, so in this case, you have 1.5 million grass plants. So this is the largest piece just because it is the largest number of things. Okay, next one, you have 200,000 insects, 90,000 insects, and one bird. Okay, so again, this pyramid of numbers, your largest piece of the pyramid is the largest number of grass plants. Now, this right here is also a pyramid of numbers. Okay, for this one, your 200 trees are your primary producer. Okay, and it is a very small piece of the pyramid, just because 200 trees can support 150,000 insects. Okay, so the second question, why would trees, the primary producer, have the smallest piece of the pyramid? Again, that's just because 200, the amount, the number of trees, is less than the first level consumer. And last one, okay, pyramid of energy. So why would plants, the primary producer, be the largest piece of the pyramid? And why would it make sense for pyramids of energy to have the largest piece of the pyramid as the primary producer? So generally, pyramids of energy are always going to be that nice pyramid shape. You're always going to have the largest piece of the pyramid on the bottom because your primary producer has to produce the most energy. Anytime a pyramid of energy does not have the primary producer as the largest piece, you know that that is an unstable ecosystem, because if it's not providing enough energy for the first level consumer, there will not be enough energy for that pyramid all the way up to the apex consumer. All right, exit ticket. Go ahead, pause here, try these by yourself. So exit ticket, let's go ahead and go through this. What does an ecological pyramid show? Remember, models that show the relative amount of energy or matter contained within each trophic level in a given food chain or web. What are the three types of ecological pyramids? The three types we discussed were pyramids of energy, biomass, and numbers. What is the difference between how matter flows and how energy flows? Energy flows in a one-way stream through ecosystems, whereas matter is recycled. Number 4, if a primary producer contains 5,000 calories, how many calories would be available to the second level consumer? So this one's kind of tricky, right? Primary producer is 5,000. The first level or primary consumer would be 10% of that, so 500, but then the second level or secondary consumer would be 10% of that 500 calories, so that would be 50 calories. Okay? So now that we've gone through this lesson together, go back, check your vocabulary. If you have any questions on that pyramid slide, that is the one that is typically a little bit more confusing, please feel free to reach out to your teacher. Thank you for listening.